Okay, this is a little bit more. This is part 2 of lesson 24 because I wanted to do some where the x is not squared but the y is squared. Right here. See how this y value is squared and it's a negative? Okay, what that tells me is it's a parabola that's going to open up to the left. And I can still tell my vertex, but you got to be really careful. You know, here, when the x was squared, we would be like, oh, your vertex is negative 10 because that's your x, 1. Okay, but look right here. You can't say your x is negative 3. Your y is negative 3. So here my vertex is going to be 4, negative 3. So be real careful and don't get it switched. Okay, as everybody see, it's the y value that's a negative 3. Okay, and what's tagged on will be your x value. So it's going to be swapped, which makes sense that it should be backwards. Okay, if you didn't believe it, you know, remember when you do this little t-chart, when you get ready to graph it, remember how I suggested that if whatever it's solved for, notice it's solved for x, you want to plug in values for the other side. So I would pick negative 3 because it makes it 0. 0 squared 0, negative 0 is still 0, so I have 0 plus 4, which is 4. So you could still do it that way, okay? But here's what I've got. 4, negative 3, right there. I know it's going to open to the left, okay? But just pick anything to either side of this. 0 would be one of my favorite things to also, to plug in, sorry. We're plugging in for y. If I plug in a 0, I get 3. 3 squared is 9, but it's going to be a negative 9 plus 4, which is a negative 5. So I've got the point negative 5, 0, which is right there. Now remember, now here's your axis of symmetry. Whoops, you can tell I'm looking through my phone. I'm all shaky. Okay, so do you see how, right here's your axis of symmetry, and it went up 3, 1, 2, 3. That means it's going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now I'd like you to have one more point, so plug in something else. Let's plug in, what was that? Negative 5, 0. Okay, let's plug in something else between 4 and 5. I'd like to plug in something here. How about if we plug in like a negative 2 for y? Plug in a negative 1, I don't care, but if you plug in a negative 2 and you add 3, you get 1. 1 squared is 1. So I have a negative 1 plus 4, which is 3. So there's a 3, negative 2. Now see how it's 1 above? That means I'm going to have 1 below. So you can see that I have a nice parabola that opens up to the left, like this. Woo! I just missed my point by looking through my phone. That stinks, because I wanted a pretty little guy. Okay, now what did I ask you to find here? Graph each equation, state the vertex as well. So we just did that. No big deal. Okay, let me give you another hint here. Okay, just you should know your vertex. This x value is going to be 3, and then whatever's tagged on the end. Okay, if there's nothing added or subtracted, there's no parentheses, vertex should just be 0, 0. Love those. Let me see if I can find another one where the y is squared. How about this one? I think I did this one in class. Okay. Is that the one I want to do? Maybe. Okay, so if the y is squared, I want to get the x over here by itself. So I'm going to move the x over. So it looks like that. Okay. And then I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to only look at the things with the y's. So I'm going to half it and square it. If you half it, you get 4. If you square it, you get 16. But if I add 16, I'm going to eventually have to subtract 16 because I need to undo it. Typically, on everything else, you know, when you add 16, we'd add 16 to the other side, but we really want to keep this guy by himself. Okay, so the whole reason we do that is we want to write this guy as something squared. So notice this is going to be y plus 4 because half of 8 is a positive 4. Or you can think 4 squared 16. And 19 minus 16 is 3. So what is your vertex here? Be careful because this is my y value. So my y value is going to be a negative 4. And what's tagged on here would be your x. So there's your vertex. Okay, and then just graph it. I know, by the way, I'm going to let you graph this, but it's a parabola that opens up like this. Going to be to the side, okay, because it's the y value that's squared and it's positive. And here's your vertex, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's right here. So it's going to look something like this. But you're going to plug in a point right here. And you're like, what will I plug in? Well, I plug in something that's simple. okay, I would be plugging in like a -3. Okay, definitely, you know, 0 is one of my favorite things to plug in. I definitely like -3 because I can see when I add 4 that it's going to give me 1, and it just keeps your numbers a little smaller. But plug in what you want, okay? I said 5 points, but definitely give me at least 3, and you know, it's 5 unless it's falling off the graph crazy, okay? Now, somebody asked me, could I do this? Remember when I gave you this formula in class to find the vertex? And I said, yeah, that's great, but when these are switched around like this, you've got to be careful because when notice these are y's. So when you plug in this equation, and let me rewrite this what we originally had. If you're going to do it this method, bring your x over here, you get this, y squared plus 8y plus 19. If you're going to do this method to find your vertex, now that these are y's, when you solve this, you're really going to find the y part. So if this wants the -b, that's going to give you a -8 all over 2a, and a is 1. Notice that gives me a -4, and that's what you got. To find the other one, you have to plug in the -4. So if you plug in a -4 right here, you would get 16. And if you plug in a -4 in there, you get 32 plus 19. I would probably do this. 16 plus 19 is what, 35 minus 32, you can see is 3. So that's how you would get that variable right there. I don't like that method as well, probably, unless you're in a hurry just to find the vertex, but that would work on these, is just to use this formula. X equals -b over 2a, or that can also find your y, so just be really careful on that. Hopefully that's enough to get you guys started. If you have specifics, ask me a question.